Now we're going to talk about several things that are under Title II. So who is obligated? This applies to state and local governments, including state executive agencies, courts, legislatures, towns, cities, counties, school districts, universities, community colleges, water districts, special purpose districts, regional transit authorities, other state and local government instrumentalities, and Amtrak. So it can be difficult to determine whether a particular entity that is providing a public service is in fact a public entity. So these are the four things that you should consider when trying to determine if a public service is in fact also a public entity. Whether the entity is operated by public funds, the entity's employees are considered government employees, the entity receives significant assistance from government by provision of property or equipment, and whether the entity is governed by an independent board selected by members of a private organization or board elected by the voters or appointed by elected officials. So next, who is protected? So to be protected under the ADA, a person needs to meet their definition of disability. So they define it in 3 parts, and only one of those 3 parts has to be met. So the first part has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. 2, has a history or a record of a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And 3, is regarded as having an impairment whether the person has the impairment or not. So, under the ADA Amendments Act of 2008 states that the definition of disability should be construed in the favor of a broad coverage of people in the maximum extent permitted by law. In the past, there were debates over major life activities as defined their disability. So, conditions such as gastrointestinal disorders, diabetes, cancer, and heart disease often only affect bodily function without producing any outward limitations like walking, talking, or doing any daily tasks. But the ADA Amendments Act cleared up all of that, saying any bodily functions are indeed major life activities. So the law lists functions of the immune system, normal growth cell, digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive function. So pretty much everything is covered under that major life activities. So some of the exclusions that are included, that are excluded completely from the definition of disability is transvestitism, transsexualism, pedophilia, any gender identity disorders, not resulting from a physical impairment, any sexual behavior disorders, compulsive gambling, kleptomania, pyromania, and any psychoactive substance use disorders resulting from current illegal use of drugs. So then it has another section of just the illegal use of drugs. So current use is the illegal use of controlled substances. So if somebody is currently using illegal substances, a public entity has the right to withhold benefits or services from somebody that is doing so. Now, a lot of states now have adopted medical and or recreational marijuana use, and that does not affect ADA, even though under federal law it is still a controlled substance, therefore it is illegal. So Title II requires that people with disabilities have an equal opportunity to participate in public entities program. Therefore, they have a program under Title II that is called program accessibility. So many people with disabilities are unable to take advantage of the public entities. So public entities must ensure that people with disabilities are not excluded from any type of program, service, or activities because facilities are inaccessible. There's also no grandfather clause that exempts old facilities. So programs, services, and activities, when viewed in their entirety, must be readily accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. So therefore, if there is a service coming out, if there is a new building being built, ADA has to make it accessible for individuals so that they are not excluded from that particular service or activity. Also under Title II, service animals are covered. service, not emotional support. So they have to be trained to prevent a task or to prevent something or to help somebody with daily livings. Also found this interesting, miniature horses are also covered, which some people use miniature horses as service animals. And that was just a tidbit that I found very interesting that the ADA actually specifically put in there.